see how it goes in the sense of time. I'll turn this thing off. So our Old Testament lesson for today is Isaiah 9, technically 1 through 4, but probably I will try to pull a trick, something like a rabbit out of the hat, stuff like that, with verse 9, which is kind of important actually to the text, because if you go home, that might be your home task. If you go home and see kind of like a development of what we have in chapter 9 and what we have in chapter 7, and what we have in the beginning of Gospels, it might give you some hint and a clue that that's almost a parallel story. We have a political crisis, not political actually inside, it's more like an outside threat. And the leaders are kind of scared, they don't really know what to do. And then God gives a sign, and the sign is a baby, a boy. And then you have a special name in both chapter 7 and in chapter 9. And we know this famous verse in 7:14, his name will be Emmanuel, okay? And then Matthew elaborates on that. And in chapter 9, we have verse 6, where we have actually a bunch of names, actually 4. So we'll talk about that. Now think that way when you reread gospel stories, the beginning of nativity stories, okay? Because out of the blue, in the palace, Herod's palace in Israel, Judea, some important wise men show up and they said, "Where's the king?" It's like, the king is there. And said, we saw the new king, who was born. So it's everything is unstable politically, but there is a sign of a boy. So that's the thing. Before we'll go into the text, there are a few things that I would like to remind you. I know you're all well educated. We have talked about that many times with us and with your previous Bible teachers. But see, Isaiah, as I love to draw my timeline. I don't know. Sorry. Can you guys kind of see it? Okay. So that's our timeline. So we have 1445 BC. That's our Exodus. Okay. In about 1000 year BC, we have temple. Okay. So about 700 something, let's say 720 BC, we have Isaiah. Okay, how do we know it is about 720? Because he lived, actually it's a long period of time when he prophesied, but it's roughly about destruction of Samaria, okay, the northern kingdom. And then in 586 BC, we have a temple destroyed, and Jerusalem, and that's where Babylonian captivity starts. Okay, so we have about 150 years toward Babylonian captivity, and we have about 700 years before Christ. Yet, in our today's gospel reading, if you want to jump or if you have bulletins, you can see that. Okay, Matthew 4. Interestingly enough, Matthew, as an author of a gospel, says, I'm sorry, says, verse 14, or let's say 13, and leaving Nazareth, he went and lived in Capernaum by the sea in the territory of Zebulun and Naphtali, so that what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. Okay, so the question is, and then he quotes from our text today. So the question is, Isaiah said something roughly at this time, maybe a little bit earlier, most likely, like maybe 730s, 740s. Was it not fulfilled, so it was meaningless for the people of his days till Christ came, or what? Okay, that's serious and important question. And my personal belief is we need to think of the prophetic sayings in a sense, in a threefold manner. That's another timeline. So let's say we have a prophecy. This is our Isaiah. And he said it roughly about 740. Okay? He said it first time. The reason he said it, as I said, there was a political crisis with the relationship to other countries. Actually, it was brother against brother. We might talk about that a little bit later, but the main idea we used to have one united kingdom out of 12 tribes. After Solomon, his son made a dumb decision and the kingdom split. Now we have north and we have south. Okay? So north in the times of Isaiah, northern guys try to unite forces with Syrian guys to attack the south. Okay? So it was almost civil war with inclusion of other guys. It's kind of serious threat. So as a response, we have this prophecy. And the prophecy says, don't worry about that. God will handle it. It will be like a day of Midianites. Okay? And that brings us back actually to the Exodus story. We'll touch on that if we'll have time. But the point is, it was fulfilled for the first time right there. Okay? So it has a first fulfillment. On the other hand, we have fulfillment of that with Jesus. That's what the Matthew is built upon. So there is a first fulfillment and a fuller fulfillment, as Paul says in his letters. Every prophecy in him, means Jesus Christ, is yes and amen. Okay, so the whole, whatever word you want to use, consummation, the whole revelation, everything, what was the direction of the history of development of the history of the church, or the development of history of the world, was coming to this point. There is another important thing is, this is the time of Jesus Christ. And we are, as a church, Christ's body. So therefore, from time to time, we might experience something similar. And that means, that's why it is important to read the whole Bible. So, the Bible starts in Genesis and ends in Revelation, because everything, including this one, is applicable to us in some typological way, one way or the other. Okay? So we can see biblical prophecies unfolding, as I said, 3 ways. Okay? That's kind of like a small introduction. Now let us go into text itself. Before we'll go into text as a text, let's draw our map, because it is kind of important. Okay, there is a simple way to draw the map of Israel in 3 hand moves. I already showed it many times. That's your Mediterranean Sea, Galilean Sea, Jordan, Dead Sea. That's it. Okay? Why do we need to know it? Because 2 important tribes of Israel will be mentioned here. And what the tribes are is we have Naphtali and we have Zebulun. Okay? And that's 2 of them were about here. So this area. Okay? One and the other. The cool thing about that is that's where so-called King's Road was, how you can get from Syria and Assyria and Babylon to Egypt. So it was a main trade path. But on one hand, it is on the main trade path, and the trade path would go through Jerusalem and so on and so forth. But that's the northern outskirts of Israel as a country. Okay, so that's important to know. Again, one of your home tasks is if you'll go to Judges, okay, chapter 1, see how story develops, how tribes settle in the land. Okay? If you read it, I will summarize it really briefly, but if you read it, like in a place of Judea, whereas here, they drove everybody out. They were able to basically, everybody, all the people who used to live there, they conquered them, they took the cities, everything was fine. But the further you go, in some places they ended up with some people, local people, still living among them. But when you read about these northern areas, it even said that they were not as successful. Actually, they had to live in the mountains, in the caves, and the locals still controlled the land. So from the very beginning, we know, from the very beginning of development of this country, we know that these guys were always a kind of a mixture of faithful tribes of Israel, I mean, however faithful they were, on one hand. On the other hand, there were lots of people who still carried on their pagan practices. They still were not into this worship of Yahweh and stuff like that. Okay, so it's the guys who are not really into this faith. So therefore, they were, in a sense, a representative of what I would call spiritual frontier. Okay, so that's where you are engaged in what we call nowadays evangelism on a day-to-day basis. You meet and face, you meet face to face those who do not conform to your faith, your liturgical practices, your confession of faith and stuff like that. And it's not like you have, Lutheran hymnal versus, let's say, Baptist hymnal. It's not even close. It's not a denominational thing. It's a real worldview difference. Okay? On one hand. Secondly, being out here, it is a border with, okay, I think we spelled this now. Syria, okay, with the capital in Damascus, okay, on one hand, and there were other guys here. It's a Tyre, not Big Grand Tyre. I mean, it's not about that. It's a country, Tyre, and Sidon. The cool thing about these guys, depending on faithfulness of Israel, these guys will be either supportive or very destructive to Israel. If Israel acted faithfully, these guys turned out to be one of the main helpers and supporters. In the days of King David and Solomon, that's where we got our cedar wood to build the temple. It was Hiram, the king of Tyre, who supported the project of building a temple, or the temple, for Israelite God. And, in our days, if you are a king and you have lots of money, you can donate to whatever charity you want. Okay, this is completely different mentality. Because if you start to play with other country divinity, your local gods might get upset with that. So to support the construction project for another god, it's kind of a big deal for the country. But that was in good old days. Nowadays turn out to be a little bit worse. And we have a king Ahab, okay? And who provided wife for King Ahab? She was from here. She was Sidonian princess. So who provided prophets that Elijah had to fight with? It was her prophets. Okay? So when Israel is faithful, Israel can influence other bordering countries on a positive way. And they are supporting. They are happy as we sing, in our post-hymnal praise, the Gentiles will come to worship, on the Lord's heel. Okay, they are happy to do that. But the problem is when Israel inside of itself is unfaithful, these guys make life of faithful ones, they turn it into nightmare. Okay? Now, with all of this background in mind, let us dive into the text. So, 9:1. But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time, he brought into the contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the later time, he has made glorious the way of the sea. Okay, that's the king's way. Okay, the land beyond the Jordan, the Galilee of nations. Okay, so we have few things here. So first of all, as I said, we need to combine two things together. First of all, it is time. In the very beginning, when tribes settled, this was a spiritually hard to develop area. Okay? Now, or there will be a time in the future, and for Isaiah's mind, I believe it was a near future, but as we saw, the total fulfillment of that was with Christ, when main ministry actually was placed around Galilean Sea. Okay? He spends at least equal time in Jerusalem and in Galilee. Okay? But so it's a time thing of development and a geography thing too. So we have this Zebulun and Naphtali, the place beyond. So where Jordan the Jordan starts at the Galilean lake. So the something that is higher or more north of Jordan, that's what it talks about. And as I said, the Galilee of nation. So this territory of Galilee, where many nations were brought together. Okay. So, what would be told to those guys? The people who walked in the darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelled in a land of deep darkness, for them the light shone. Two things. It does not mean that, unlike other territories, we have... Okay, let me scratch it and start over. The place where we used to live is very close to polar circle. And if you pass polar circle, you have long so-called Arctic days and long Arctic nights. Okay? It's not about that. The geography split is not as big. The point is, because they were under influence of other countries, spiritually speaking, they were in darkness. To understand it, we might refer to Psalm 119, as we joke sometimes, the shortest psalm in the Bible. It's only 176 verses. Okay, in Psalm 119, verse 105, your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. So the reason they were in darkness, because they were kind of far away from the word of the Lord. Again, the reason is partially geographical. Jerusalem is here, the temple is here. Even though they're supposed to have like a Levitical, what we would call synagogues or places of meeting or places of prayers, still living on the boundaries with other countries and being very heavily influenced by these other ideologies or other worldviews, they kind of lost that connection with the Word, but the great light will shine for them, which tells us two things. One of them is God is still in control and He has a plan. Another one is He has not, therefore, the second one part is He has not forgotten about anybody. And in time it will develop. And it's very interesting that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. He spent some time in other far distant place in Egypt. Then he comes back and the family, for whatever reason, providentially I would believe, settles in this Galilean area. Okay, and he spends his ministry time very much, and he calls his first apostles, not in Jerusalem, where the universities are, where the seminaries are, but, among the fishermen of Galilee. So that's the light for them. Okay, verse 3. You have multiplied the nations, and you have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with the joy of the harvest, and they are glad when you divide the spoil. So because as I said, we have many nations here as the tribe of Naphtali and the tribe of Zebulun, and there is actually the tribe of Asher over here, and there are Tyre and Sidon, there is Syria and all of that, and because it is a trade path, so many people who go through, they can be influenced, and they can have a witness or outreach, attempt to give them this kind of word, and therefore this joy will be fulfilled. And that kind of brings us back to the very beginning of Isaiah. If you have your Bibles, you want to jump with me. If not, just let me open the verse. In chapter 2, we have wonderful words. The whole idea of why Isaiah is preaching, it has a twofold. One of them is to strengthen or reshape the relationship with Israel. On the other hand, it shall come to pass in the later days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains and shall be lifted up above the hills. And all the nations shall flow to it. Okay, so there will be a time where all the nations, and first of all, they meant all the nations around it, of course, including probably Egypt, Philistia, Moab, Ammon, and all the others will come and worship here. But here we are, 21st century, West Bank, like Bank of west side of, not West Bank in Israel, but the west side of the United States, far, far away from them. And yet, spiritually, we are connected to this hill, to the hill of the Lord. We do worship same God as they worshipped. Okay, that word reached us through the time and space, so we can be connected with this one. So the whole idea was from the very beginning to bring many nations to the worship of this God. Okay, verse 4, for the yoke of his burden and the staff for his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor you have broken as in the day of Midian. Okay? On one hand, again, it's a political statement because there were other countries who tried to rule over this territory. On the other hand, we can take it much more spiritually than maybe many other verses. Because who is the main oppressor in the life? And, if we are informed by catechism and the Bible, it's a sin, flesh, and the devil. All of this has been broken. It doesn't mean that we do not stumble anymore, but it has been overcome. We are on victorious side. We are on the side of the one who already took victory, who already is victorious. Verse 5, for every boot of the tramping warrior in the battle tumult, and every garment rolled in the blood, for he burned the fuel for the fire. Okay, so that this army or military terminology is very prominent for Scripture, especially when we talk about the fight not only between countries, but mainly when we talk about life, when we talk about our temptations. Is it regular when we say, it's a burning sin. It burns, and you have to resist it. And we do resist it. Why? The main basis for resistance is, that's why I wanted to include it, verse 6. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given. And the government, so he is the ruler upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called. Before we'll go into the name itself, I want to stay a little bit with this verb, called. Okay? He is not going to be named. Okay? He is going to be called. A little bit different. I know we can hardly see this difference, but the point is, when you give a name, it's a name. It's, in a sense, it's a title. But when you call somebody, you want to be, in a relation. I can call my daughter, Nada, and she will respond. I mean, we call somebody, and the idea when we call a name, the person responds. Okay, so it's not a tag to place on somebody. To call somebody's name, it's to initiate relationship. Okay, so what kind of name do we have? Very cool. We have it, okay, in ESV, we have Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. I'll skip first two because we can go deep in every one of them, definitely. But first two are relatively self-explanatory. The only thing is, it's not simply Mighty God. It's a God like Almighty, okay, all-powerful God. Then Everlasting Father can be translated as Father forever. Okay, so he is, now think about that. A child is born, son is given, whose name is Father forever. Okay, he can be called, he can be addressed by this title, Father forever. Now, in the very beginning of our lesson, I said, we have this threefold fulfillment of this prophecy. Okay, on one hand, it is a promise for them who used to live in 8th century BC. Okay, and they hold to that dearly. And I believe because Hezekiah, the king Hezekiah, was faithful disciple of the Lord and faithful listener to Isaiah. That's why they were able to stand with a supernatural power, actually, to Assyrians. On the other hand, that's what Jesus does. He presents Father forever. And that's what we have always. If you read gospel stories, scene after scene, Jesus does not say, see, that's how cool I am. Very seldom. I don't remember any story like that. What he says is, he either points to the Father, or in the last speech that he gave to his disciples, he points to the Spirit. It's great for you guys if I will withdraw my presence from you, if I will leave, because if I will leave, then the greater guy will come. And if I will not leave, you'll stuck with me, however cool I am, but the greater guy will not come. Okay, it's much more beneficial for you that the other one will come. So he points to either to the Father or to the Spirit. And here we have this one. The Father forever. And all of us have, or most of us have, some family issues. And I have my personal stuff, This is very dear to me. And we have lots of, especially my, kids' age, where I talk to my sons and daughters, and they have friends, and this family is divorced, and this family is this, and this family is that. This is one of the most important verse you can share with them, with those broken-hearted kids who have lost their fathers for whatever reason. They have Father forever who loves them and who cares for them. And the last one is very interesting, because when we hear Prince of Peace, when you hear word Prince, what do you think? It's a king's son. Okay, most likely he is dressed up in a very nice suit, and okay, even not going into UK present situation when Prince Harry resigned from being a, top, royalty, what's that, bigger royalty or higher royalty status, whatever the status is. In those days, the word which is there, the word Tsar, okay, that's where Russian word actually Tsar comes from. This word Tsar, so it's Tsar Shalom, Prince of Peace. So Tsar actually means the guy who leads army into the battle. Now think about that. I don't know, like a colonel, to make a parallel. So it's a colonel of peace or general of peace. Okay? On one hand, he is a tough military character, but his point is to preserve peace. And shalom, of course, is not necessarily, not only. It's not only peace between the countries, like peace treaty. It's a state of relationship with divine when everything gets like normal, settled. Okay? So he is fully equipped to protect this peace for us. And therefore, he equips us to bring this peace to others. Therefore, do not be surprised when you draw upon that and when you see in letter to Ephesians, chapter 6, start with verse 12, how Christian looked like. How does he look like? He has helmet, breastplate, band, sword, shield. Okay, again, not for attacking, not for enforcing something, but for defending, protecting, and encouraging other peoples to maintain this peace. That's all I wanted to say for today. Questions or comments?